Hey, Bourbon family. Thankfully, it is Thursday, which also means it's Thirsty Thursday. Whiskey Phoenix coming to you today. Again, not with a review. I think we'll get back to those tomorrow. But instead, kind of continuing this education content, so to speak, because honestly, the last couple of days that I've been doing it, it's actually made me even more curious. So today I thought I would do, for those of us that are still new to the community and aren't the bourbon enthusiasts with years under our belts like some of the bourbon TikTok community is, I thought I would do something, we'll call it Bourbon Whiskey 101. So basically bourbon is an American product, right? And even I kind of assumed that bourbon is strictly from Kentucky, but in my research, I learned that the regulations, at least as far as geography goes, only states that the spirit must be produced in the United States. So let's go down this journey a little bit, whether you're new to whiskey and looking to learn more like I am about bourbon's history and what makes it unique. Let's see what my research came up with. So kind of a little introduction to bourbon whiskey I found rather fascinating, honestly, because again, I am by no means, the seasoned bourbon veteran, but I hope to be there, maybe in the next decade. We'll see. So to make bourbon, these rules must be followed. Now, I'm going to be reading above based on the research because I can't memorize all this stuff. So we already said the spirit must be produced in the United States. The grain used in the mash, what bourbon is distilled from, must be at least 51% corn. It must be aged in new charred oak barrels. The spirit coming out of the still is a maximum of 80% alcohol or 160 proof. When placed in the barrel, the spirit must be no more than 62.5% alcohol by volume. And the bottled spirit must, at a minimum, be 80 proof or 40% alcohol by volume. And it must not contain any flavoring or coloring. So those are the rules you have to follow when making bourbon. Now, bourbon bears similarities to other types of whiskey, but stand out for the high corn content and the use of new oak barrels. Now, I did find this interesting as well in my research. Scotch whiskey, for example, can use older barrels, and the mash is 100% malted barley, no corn. Additionally, Scotch must be aged for a minimum of 3 years. And there's no aging requirement for bourbon. To be classified as a straight bourbon whiskey, it must be aged for a minimum of 2 years in new charred oak barrels, but many bourbons are aged significantly longer for richer flavor profile. We see these 8 years, 12 years, 14 years, whatever it may be. But lastly, where it's done is key. Like Scotch, and I honestly, I didn't know this, Scotch can only be produced in Scotland. Who knew? While bourbon is only made in America. So a little bit of history I found interesting as well, that bourbon's been produced in the U.S. since the 1800s. But its origins actually go back to the 17th century when Dutch, Scottish, German, British, and French settlers brought their distilling craft to our shores. Now, corn was popular because it was plentiful, sweet, and grew faster than other grains. Then it goes on to say, in 1791, George Washington enacted an unpopular distilling tax, after which many distillers fled to Kentucky. Aha, see, that's why so much, I bet, comes from Kentucky, but let's see. Not that they were exempt from the law there, but it's just kind of what happened is what it says. So whiskey produced during this time came to be known as Kentucky whiskey. Bourbon country was named after the French royal family to recognize their support during the American Revolution, and whiskey shipped from there was labeled bourbon. Corn whiskey from neighboring states also started using the term, and by the late 1800s, distillers came together to develop rules that would distinguish their product from other whiskeys on the market. I didn't know any of this. This is what I found during my research. Now, there are 6 types of what are considered main bourbons. There's the high corn, indicates the mash bill is mostly or all corn. High rye means what's not corn is mostly rye. Wheated bourbon contains wheat instead of rye. Single barrel bourbon is bottled from a single cask and is generally done when the distiller feels a particular barrel of whiskey has a unique character. Cask strength is bottled without diluting to 40% ABV. In other words, it is overproof and quite strong. And small batch bourbon is not mass produced and is usually made in small capacity pot stills. It's also fascinating to me because I have seen a lot on labels, straight bourbon. And I always wondered what that meant. And now I know. It means that the spirit was aged for at least 2 years in a barrel. This research I found rather interesting to kind of like get into, I guess, a Bourbon History 101. I'm sure it goes a lot more in depth, but I figured I would just start with the basics for myself. And the research that I found, I think really, contained enough in there for me to, gain an understanding of it. So, yeah, we have a little history lesson where bourbon is concerned today. And speaking of straight bourbon whiskey and cask strength, well, Jefferson Reserves did a review on that. You can check that out on my TikTok page. And again, let me know what you think of these. I'm open to constructive criticism. I'm just trying to approach this from my standpoint of being new to the bourbon community. Again, at the end of 2025, will be just 1 full year in my bourbon journey. Also wanted to let you guys know, just in case, because TikTok's been a little crazy, you can find me under the same tag on Instagram and YouTube. And Facebook even, and the Bird app, Twitter. Like I said, just in case anything happens, I post all my stuff there that I put out on TikTok. So, I'll try and, maybe figure out a way to put up a still photo that has all the information where that's concerned. Just in case anything happens. I've been seeing a lot of other creators creating backup accounts here on TikTok as well, which has kind of got me thinking I may do the same thing just to be on the safe side. Although it would really be a shame because, I'd hate to have to, put you guys through all that and get all these, wonderful followers back and everything. And yeah, I'm seriously going to have to try to figure out what I can do. At last check, I was over 450 followers. Thank you all so much. I cannot tell you. Again, I said it the last couple of days, but it honestly means the world to me. And I'd like to do something special if I get to 500 followers before the end of the year. So I guess I seriously need to start thinking about, what I'm going to do. I can't talk good enough about this bourbon community. When I got into gaming and was a tournament organizer and everything, the gaming community welcomed me with such open arms and made me feel welcome. And the bourbon TikTok community, and even just the other bourbon community that I'm a part of here in Southwest Ohio, has welcomed me with open arms, and I love it. That's what I love about these kind of communities. I was fortunate, once I decided to leave the gaming community, to find the same type of thing in the bourbon community. So thank you all so much for your support, for watching my videos, for liking them, for following me. I'm trying to follow people back that follow me. I think it's only fair. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I love you all so much for it. I really do. With that being said, I hope you enjoy the rest of this thankful/thirsty Thursday. As always, please drink responsibly, and I'll see you in the next one.